tuned in to the Andrew Lawton Show.
To get into the serious stuff of the Alberta election, we're going to be talking about the, I want to say the sweep. And I have to be cautious with how we describe the win, because Danielle Smith obviously was victorious. The UCP won. They did lose seats from what they had going into it. But I think anyone could have said going into it that that was always going to be the case, that that was always going to happen. Jason Kenney in 2019 did so well that it was going to be very difficult for any UCP led by him or anyone else to rise to that same threshold. I think this is where it's important to look forward, because the campaign that the UCP ran was really sticking to conservative strengths. It wasn't a campaign that was talking largely about sovereignty. It wasn't relitigating the COVID file. It was talking about economy. It was talking about jobs. It was talking about oil and gas. It was talking about all of these other things that are fairly, I don't want to say, well, no, let's be real. They're safe conservative issues. These are things that the conservatives, generally speaking, can talk about in a broadly appealing way. She wasn't campaigning on the culture war, although obviously there are people that know her as that and expect her to be that. But one of the things that I think a lot of people are going to be looking for is what the path forward is. What's the plan here? So it's my pleasure to welcome back the newly reelected MLA for Calgary Shaw, also still in cabinet as Minister of Municipal Affairs, Rebecca Schulz. Rebecca, good to talk to you. Congratulations again, and thanks for coming on today.
Hi, Andrew. Thank you so much.
So obviously, Calgary was the nail biter of the night. I mean, you saw me upstage there at the Monday night event, just withering away because it was going several hours, and some of your colleagues' ridings just kept flipping back and forth with each poll. Why was Calgary so difficult for your party and the NDP to really claim? And why do you think it went the way it did, with the NDP really picking up a fair bit of ground there?
And I said this on election night, that the last 4 years have been a challenge. We ran on jobs economy pipeline, and we faced things that we just couldn't predict, like an oil price crash, an economic downturn, obviously COVID. And so there were some challenges there. But when I look at where Alberta is today versus where our province was after 4 years of the NDP, I think Albertans wanted certainty. I mean, the NDP and almost every media outlet asked me about the division in the campaign. And of course, the NDP ran a highly divisive campaign. It was negative. A lot of it was complete fear and misinformation, and they put a lot of money behind it, as did some of the unions. And so that also made it a challenge. And we remain focused on our record, our 4 years in government, where Alberta was in terms of leading the nation in economic growth, jobs, opportunity, and a platform that built on our spring budget and committed to things like keeping communities safe. Again, making sure our economy is more diverse than ever before, balanced budgets, things that resonate with the vast majority of Albertans. And so that's why I think ultimately Albertans decided, look, we want a party that's going to give us something to vote for, that has some optimism both in our province and its people. And that's why I do think that we saw a positive result overall just the other night.
One of the things I found interesting, to your point there, is that there really were two campaigns in some ways. There was the policy-oriented campaign that you're talking about there, and there was also the divisiveness and the negativity and I think the media obsessions over, what Danielle said in a blog post, in 1942 or whatever. But it was interesting how much the message that your party put forward broke through with people, though, in some ways. I remember on the way back from the UCP election night party on Monday. So it was 12:30 a.m. I'm going to my hotel, and the driver of the Uber said, thinking I was a UCP guy and not a journalist, I voted for you guys. And for the first time in my life, he said. And I said, well, I'm a journalist, but I'm still curious. Why did you vote UCP? And he said, well, his 21-year-old daughter told him to. Because she believed that the UCP was the party that would guarantee economic security. And he said, it was very moving. He said, I was voting for my daughter's future. And that's the type of story, when I share it, that makes it sound like I'm campaigning for you guys. But in reality, it was actually interesting, because I had seen all of the CBC stuff and the Rachel Notley stuff. But here's a guy that really is, I think, your model voter in what you were trying to tell people.
Yeah, and it really was a platform that focused on just the top of mind issues for everyday Albertans. And as Conservatives who run on balanced budgets, we're not the party that has a commitment for everybody, right? We have commitments, or I mean, like in terms of dollar amounts and the big spending amounts. It's a commitment to maintain fiscal responsibility. You have to manage your finances in your household, and we're going to manage your tax dollars responsibly. We're going to make sure we have a strong growing economy. Why? Because if we don't, we can't invest in our healthcare system, in our education system, in mental health and addictions, and keeping communities safe, whether you live in Calgary, Edmonton, or rural Alberta. These are things that matter to people. And I had a lot of people, I mean, we were door knocking. I think I finished door knocking on election night at 10 after 7. Like, we went until the very end. And I had people say, man, like, I just had to stop watching the news through this campaign. I can't believe how negative it was. And so I was really encouraged to see that our message resonated. And we did have, you know, it wasn't just about, because some people said, do you think it's a election campaign between two leaders? Is it, you know, two people? And I said, it's also two records. We have the NDP, who had a record of 4 years in government that a lot of people just said, look, we can't afford to go back to that. And we also had a record that also, through a difficult time, we came out here in Alberta, a place of hope, optimism, opportunity, where more people are choosing to call our province home, record investments in healthcare and education, and a balanced budget, and a commitment to keep communities safe. You know, I think people just felt like, look, I can get behind that. And I think they started to see through, you know, some of those ads. No, you're not going to have to pay to see a family doctor. You know, you're not. Danielle Smith made that commitment, and I think people started to see through some of the negativity too.
I know when a government comes into power, and I'm referring specifically to Danielle Smith, not the UCP, through a leadership, there's a bit of nervousness in going too bold with policies because you didn't really receive a mandate from voters. And now you have received that mandate. So do you see there as being a more significant change of course in your government's priorities, or do you really see continuity from what have been the priorities of the cabinet for the last 8 months?
Yeah, I'll say, you know, Danielle Smith, when she was elected leader of the United Conservatives, really put effort into bringing our caucus and our team together and maintaining that, you know, we are a big tent coalition of the center-right. And I also think that when you look at our platform and you look at the top issues, look, whether you live in rural Alberta or you live in Calgary, community safety matters. Making sure that there are police officers and that, you know, when you're in an emergency, somebody's going to come and respond. EMS response times. This was a huge win for Danielle Smith, where, you know, she just reached out to paramedics and said, what is the barrier? Why are our response times so long? And she took their feedback and made changes that they've been asking for over a decade. And so I think when you look at what we're committing to do, it is committing to keep our finances in order, to grow the economy, but to have a common sense approach to government, to reduce some of the barriers facing whether it's businesses or Albertans. There's a very real commitment to do that. And I think the changes she made in healthcare to bring down the surgical wait times, to bring down the EMS wait times, I think, my goodness, if we were able to do some of that in 7 months, that's a good sign for our healthcare system and for frontline healthcare workers, which is, you know, that's something top of mind for Albertans right now too, that you have a government that's willing to take a common sense approach, get rid of some of the bureaucracy, and say, how do we make sure that we have a system that works for Albertans? You know, I think that also is a big difference between us and obviously the NDP. They grew red tape, they grew the bureaucracy, and so of course we're always going to have a different approach on that front, but we want to focus on addressing the problems of Albertans right across Alberta.
I know that obviously with the losses in Calgary and in the case of Minister Madhu in Edmonton, there are some changes that are going to have to come about in cabinet. And I know you're not speaking for the Premier right now on this, but do you have any kind of indications of, I'm not going to ask you who's going in what role, but of what sort of changes will be made and what the message will be with the next cabinet?
Yeah, and I really don't have any insight into that. And
make your pitch. Tell me the spot you want.
You know, I always say this, that when I first decided to run back in 2018, I told people, like, why I wanted to get into this is because I think that Albertans deserve government that knows that we're here to serve people, that we're here to serve our neighbors. I work for Albertans, and my first and most important job is always as MLA and a local representative. So that is my top priority, but I'm also, of course, happy to serve wherever I'm needed or asked. But yeah, I don't really make those predictions.
All right, fair enough. Well, I guess the one thing I'll ask you in closing on this, obviously there was a leadership race, 8 months ago that was relatively divisive in some ways, but there was a fair bit of unity after. Again, I mean, a lot of the people that were running against Danielle Smith, including yourself, ended up being brought into cabinet and have been very big champions. Do you see the party as being unified moving forward? Because even during the last campaign, there were some people that nominally were conservative activists or called themselves conservative activists that are saying, I can't get behind the UCP for whatever reason or another.
I do believe that our team is unified, and I know media was saying, there's a couple of longtime UCP supporters that are going with the NDP. Those are people who weren't largely supportive of the UCP after unity. When we went through the leadership race, I give Danielle Smith a lot of credit for bringing our team together. And I would say this on the doors too, right? That she, really wanted to see our team come together. She took our feedback or our concerns, because even during the leadership race, I think for the most part, the debates were about records or policy positions or things like that. And so when other leadership candidates had concerns about specific policies, Danielle Smith took that feedback and made changes to legislation, to policy approaches. And, I think that went a long way in building trust amongst our colleagues. And that's why, I'm so optimistic in the unity of our team, because that also then creates unity amongst our party members as well. And I've seen that at events throughout the last couple of weeks. And I think that's what we can continue to see in the months and years to come.
All right. Well, newly reelected Calgary Shaw MLA Rebecca Schulz, congratulations again. Thanks for coming on today.
Thanks so much. Great to see you again, Andrew.
Thanks for listening to The Andrew Lawton Show. Support the program by donating to True North at www.tnc.news.